I'm Doreen Squire Ficarra, Squire being my maiden name, and my hometown is Sidmouth, Devon, England. And of course, I was in Sidmouth during World War II. I was 11 years old when war broke out, and going to school, we had to have gas masks, and mine had a very shiny cover because it was rainy, and we were not allowed to go anywhere without the gas mask, and I would have it on the handle of my bicycle, which I rode to school. Now, Sidmouth had no commercial businesses. It was a resort town insofar as without all the fancy things that they have today. It was bowling. Ladies did a lot of bowling on the green, miniature golf and that sort of thing, cricket of course, and so it was very, very sedate place to live. In fact, I hated it during winter. It was awful by the sea in winter, it was so cold. But anyway, I was on holiday at my grandparents in Modbury in Devon when everyone was clustered around, in the family was clustered around the radio, and it came over the radio that war would start on September the 3rd. So then, of course, all things getting back to Sidmouth, when the bombing of London started, we had to have evacuees, and 5 bedrooms were too many that we didn't use all of them, so we had to have evacuees, and we had a lady, a mother, and a married daughter and a single daughter, and in fact the married daughter's husband was in the Navy. She was pregnant, so even had the baby in our house. But my poor mother really had a busy time, no matter, even though they helped, she had the responsibility. And so this Mrs. Ledbetter, this lady, she had, her only son was killed in their home in London, and a daughter. They had just come back from work and were in the house when the house had a direct hit. Mrs. Ledbetter, Mrs. Young, and the other daughter, Lily, were in the Anderson shelter at the bottom of the garden, so they were saved. And so hence they came to us. And of course, bus loads of children from London and all the cities that were really being bombed were brought to the country, and everyone had to take these evacuees. So I then went to school in Exeter, which was 11 miles away, and I couldn't, I had to stay with friends because there was a very steep hill in one place between the two cities. And so all the people had to get out of the bus at the bottom of the hill. And it was a very steep one, still is. And you would walk up to the top of the hill and get on the bus again. And I don't know, they said the petrol was weak or some such thing. But anyway, it wouldn't take us up this hill. So, so that's why I stayed in Exeter. And then came May the 4th, 1942. And previous to that, we'd hear the planes going over. Of course, every house had to have blackout curtains. Everyone else had a indoor shelter, which took the place of a kitchen table or a dining room table. And it was made of steel. The government provided all this. And my job was to make sure there was a fresh bottle of water in there and a hatchet, just in case we had to. Actually, the ceilings came down on us, but we were all right. We didn't need to get out that badly. But we we heard we would hear the German planes, we called them Jerries. The Jerries were overhead, and it made a funny noise, and we knew they were loaded. And then we'd almost have a sigh of relief because the the sirens would go off, and they went on to Canterbury and Bristol and all those sort of places and bombed them. So then, just prior, in May, because they were bombing so much around the country, my father was a cattle dealer, and even though we lived in Sidmouth, he had a lot of property in the outskirts of Exeter, and where before going to market or whatever with his animals. So we would walk out and we would sleep in the hay. And as we walked out, we would see young children carrying younger children, and they would sleep in the hedges because we were all afraid that the bombs would get to us. Of course, 4th of May, we didn't do that, and we were in the house. So I think the ceiling came down on us, and that's where, in my friend's home in Exeter. And there was an unexploded bomb at the bottom of the road. They did something with that. We had to get out of the house and move somewhere, and then we were allowed back when they did something. But continually, it was incendiary bombs falling on the center of Exeter. And all night there were loud explosions all the time. We were about 10 minutes walk, maybe 15 away from the center. And the sky was lit up. It was a massive bonfire. We could see everything from where we were. And so the next morning, finally it was over, and the next morning the devastation was just terrible. I have some books on the damage done. Beautiful old buildings that had been there for centuries. It was a shame. And then my school was bombed. That was in Bedford Terrace. And fortunately, very little of the cathedral was bombed. So that was good. In fact, it was surprising. Cathedral Close really didn't have too much damage. But anyway, that's all the things that we did. And of course we had clothing rationing. And I had a dressing gown made by a dressmaker because it was cheaper clothing-wise, coupon-wise, to get things made. So I had enough for the outside of it for a long robe. So I advertised and asked, I said in a paper for not an eiderdown, a coverlet anyway, a silk coverlet. And I had one answer, and it was the very thing, so I used that. I had that done for lining the robe. But the day after March 4th, May 4th, 2nd, that's right, I don't know why I keep saying May 2nd, it's May 4th. Good thing we have books to remind us. And it was a long time ago. But there was nothing, no electricity, no water, nothing. And just like here in America, after a disaster, there's a group of Salvation Army, had everything. We had to go to a communal place for food, drink, for days. There was absolutely nothing. And we weren't, of course, allowed to go into the center. We could go around. And I have a recollection of walking down to St. David's. We had two railroads, Central Railroad and St. David's. And there was this bombed place. And I remember seeing someone trying to get out of there. And of course the police were there and we had to move. But they must have been in the basement, under all the rubble. But fortunately they were saved. But that was rather eerie to see that, because I remember seeing a hand and moving the rubble. And then the police took over, of course. So that was that. This, I saved this, I don't know why, but this is my clothing book. And this is one of the, I roomed with a gal for a while. And that was, I had to have Miss D.M. Squire, and where I lived, and I had my national registration number. And these were, I wonder why I didn't use these, but I don't think so. I brought this from England when I came to America, and I flew over Pan Am on January the 7th, 1948, arrived here the next day. We stopped for dinner in Ireland, and then coffee in Newfoundland. And I did not have coffee. I was so hot because every place had air, heating, and I wasn't used to it. We were used to fireplaces, or radiators, I suppose, some places. But anyway, the coupon books, everybody had to have that, hence my advertising for material or a piece that I could use. And so you just couldn't buy anything without clothing or food. And I think the rationing went on just for quite a number of years, 47 at least. And so I know I had a great Aunt Mary. I know just before the war, Grandma and great Aunt Mary, they were sisters in Modbury, and Granddad, of course, Rickman, who was in America for 3 years back in the 1880s. He was in Kansas City. He was a saddler and then came back and had his own business. But they bought shoes and hats, of course, and some clothes before rationing. So great Aunt Mary was able to give me some of hers, which I was quite pleased with. So yes, it was terrible to see the devastation in central Exeter, though. But the Guildhall was saved. The Guildhall has doors that you have to bend to get under. I mean, a tall man, people were shorter in those days, several hundred years old. But beautiful, beautiful buildings. And there were mere shells after the bombing, but then they had to take them down. You just couldn't leave them. There was no way, like today, they would do something with it and rebuild. But it was just after, maybe months and months after, it was all just flat rubble everywhere, where it used to be beautiful old buildings. This is the Cathedral Close. That was all shops around, and this was the cathedral. It didn't do too much. It stood, but a lot of it in the very front, I think, was damaged, as you can see. And then here is the Upper High Street, and then this was taken the morning after. And this is the central of Exeter. This was a lovely commercial union. It was an insurance company. Beautiful, beautiful building. And this is another in the High Street. And this was Deller's Cafe. This was the in place to have meals. And very, very. And here's Lloyd's Bank. And I joined Lloyd's Bank, but of course this was all destroyed and had to come down. So I was 15 and a half when I started working, because everyone was needed. It didn't matter if you finished your schooling or not. You were needed. And because all the men folk were in the Army and Navy and Air Force. But then we had to travel to a place for a business. I was in Lloyd's Bank Executor and Trustee Department, and then later on I transferred to London. This was Deller's Cafe. It's lost its, and that was pulled down because that was a complete shell and dangerous. And I have one here. Here is what was called Bedford Circus, and it was a circle. And my school was there, and my school was bombed, as I said, so had to go to another one. And here's the King and Queen arriving on the 8th of May, which was always good for morale to think that they would come. But all these places are just, today they've built new ones, but it's not anything like it used to be. But there's still an older part. But they have, I've been back in many of the places that were bombed, and they have plaques or big memorials stating what when it happened and what it was. And so people really won't forget a lot of it. So that was that. And just to give you an idea, here is Exeter before it was bombed. Oh, look at all these old places. And a lot of the old places were not very tall. I had here, this part of the Cathedral Close, I had, there was an old shoemaker on the second floor, and I got some leather, and he made me a pair of shoes. And they were open shoes, which I thought, oh, wedgies too. I thought I was God's gift to the world. And but he used to make shoes for the very, very wealthy, but he was retired. But he did a little. And so that was nice. And I bought my first evening gown in one of these shops. I had it made. And I still went back. Now it's a shoe store. And a couple of years I was back. Of course, naturally bought some shoes. But anyway, it was quite an experience. But D-Day was, I shall never forget D-Day. Around 6 o'clock, I was listening to the radio. We knew things were happening somehow, but not sure when. And this voice came on that our troops and our allies invaded France this morning. And the tone was as if the world was coming to an end. And I volunteered at the American Donut Dugout. We sold coffee and donuts. And so I walked from my flat up to, and as I was walking there, as I got out the side out of the door, it just seemed as if there was a hush on all the land. There wasn't a car. There was not one American soldier. The day before, you couldn't move on the pavements for the men were walking. Not a soul, no one. The air, it just, we were waiting for something. And to think of all those poor men, in the water, getting in to get on land in Normandy and other places. And I went to the donut dugout, and not a soul, only the lady in charge. No men, no army at all, or sailors. And it was, whenever I think of June the 6th, I always remember that, all these years. It's just something that you can never forget. So, and then of course, I had an escort to take me back to my, where I was living, after I had, I'd work of an evening, because it wasn't, it was all blackout, you see, there was nothing. And the jeeps had little narrow slits, they were covered, and just a little. There were no signposts anywhere. And Sidmouth, my hometown, all along the seafront, there were massive iron and all kinds of barbed wire, because Jerry's could come through in submarines and get through. And there again, it not only was it protected on the seafront, which was quite a long front, and then it went along, and then the next town would be doing the same, and the other side would be doing the same. So we couldn't go on the beach at all. And then further inland, they had massive concrete round things that they would pull over to the center of the road to try and at least hinder the Jerry's a little, anyone trying to come through. So yeah, it was pretty bad. And we had evacuees in our school. You had to have them, and of course in the homes and everything. And then there was an old part of down by the seafront. Well, it's a little way back, and today it's very, very in place. But there were a lot of English pubs there, and these evacuees, some of them didn't come from the best parts of London, and they would be sitting outside these pubs, and we learned that they gave gin to their babies to keep them quiet. Oh, we couldn't believe such a thing, and we went down to look at it. But as I said, we couldn't go near the front, but this was a little way, and it is beautiful. All the cottages now are very expensive, and yeah, it was really neat though.